So we're here today in conversation with Orlando Pecora, a longtime Valley resident who was born here.
Yes.
And can you tell us, were you born here in the hospital, at home, a little bit about your birth and who your parents were? And
I was born at the Nicholson CPR section house, which is just by the south of the Nicholson Bridge, and that's where my dad and family lived for quite a few years. And I was born with the help of a midwife, and I think it might have been Mrs. Franson. I've thought about that, and I wasn't too sure about that. Yeah, and that's where it started. In a little log cabin by the river. Is that what I was supposed to say?
And who were your parents?
Mom was Mary, Maria, and Dad was Francesco. Yeah. And he came in 1925 to this valley, and Mom in 1935. And Mom's uncle came in the 1880s, and he was the one that sponsored Dad. And of course then Dad's brought Mom and my older brother and sister over.
So was there a gap in the ages between your siblings then? Because
well,
of the
my
distance?
older brother and sister were only a couple years apart, and then I was, I would have been about 8 or 9 years, because my dad came in 25. Yeah, about 10 years. Yeah, and then there was 3 more.
That was quite common, wasn't it? That the husband would come ahead and then, because I've talked with other families who have that kind of an age gap, and for the same reason, that it took the husband a while to save up the money to bring the rest of the family over.
You're probably making 35 cents an hour. Yeah. And I have no idea why my great uncle Tony came to Golden. You know, you wonder why did these people end up here?
Yeah.
You know, Dad and Mom, of course, they were sponsored, so they came here. But Uncle Tony?
There was that period of time in the 1880s when the Canadian Pacific Railway was looking for big groups of people to help them complete the railway, and a lot of them were Italian, so it's a possibility.
I don't know if he stopped along the way or anywhere.
And Tony was your mother's?
My mother's uncle, so I guess that's my great uncle, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
What part of Italy did your family?
Cosenza.
Cosenza.
Provincia di Cosenza. Calabria is the region. Yeah. Cosenza, and the town is Rovigo. And I remember writing letters to my relatives from Mom and Dad, and Rovigo, Provincia di Cosenza.
So, for me, that's the same district that my husband's family came from.
Calabrese, a lot of them came from that. That was the poorest part of Italy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, his grandmother, Divina Alfano, was born in Ravello, but was registered in Rovita because it was the closest communities.
Well, all those little communities, have you been there?
No.
Yeah, there's a little town up here, a little town up there, a little town over here. Just beautiful little old houses. And now they're just remodeling them, and I have no idea how they got water and sewage in those little communities.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So, born here at Nicholson, where'd you go to school?
In Nicholson, Horse Creek School.
Can you describe where that school was located?
I knew you were going to ask that. It's, I'm not really too sure. I think it's between Reeters and Alfanos. There was an open area in there, and there was a hall. And then sometimes I have a feeling it was closer to where the Nicholson store is. But I'm sure it was between Alfanos and Reeters. There's a big wide space there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's my understanding from talking with other people from the area, is that, that's where it was, for sure, was between Readers and Alfanos. And that the school was built in the old-fashioned way by volunteers in the area, and...
I don't know, because it was, when I started school, it was there. Yeah, and the biffy was up, a little higher up.
It's always interesting how they built them behind the school, on a hill.
Yeah, there was a fence there. I guess it's maybe Reader's property or the people who owned the property previous. And the fence was, or the biffy was built against that fence.
Mm-hmm.
Divided in half, girls, boys.
That's a far stretch for our kids today because they can't even possibly imagine having
Yeah.
to go to school in conditions like that.
And I can't recall if it's a 1, 2, or 3 seaters. Or,
Yeah.
yeah, it worked.
Was it was a one-room school?
Yes, typical rectangular, you know, teacher's desk up there, and all of us. And the floors were oiled.
Mm.
Yeah, the wood had an oil surface on it. Help preserve the wood, I guess. Yeah. And my first few years there was a stove, of course, in the corner. And when I was in grade 5, we got moved into Golden.
Mm. Was that just the age or the class that got moved into Golden, or the whole school,
yeah.
because it closed at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And approximately how many kids went to school with you in that
goodness.
school? Just a guess.
I wouldn't say more than 20, 15, 20.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to visualize the interior. Yeah.
And how many grades?
I think one of each.
One of each.
Yeah. There was, but I couldn't tell you specifically, but we were scattered grade 1s, 2s, and senior grades. Yeah.
And so when you were moved into Golden, was that Lady Grace School then that you went to in Golden?
Yeah. First bus was just a little van with 12 seats in it, I think. Yeah. Let's see, I'm trying to figure out now. If I started school here, 6, then that would be 5 more years, 11. So it would be in the late 40s, early 50s when we got moved.
So the school was really there for
Quite a while.
while.
Yes. I think that's the same time that the one in McMurdo, what was it called? McMurdo Bench or the
Mountain Ridge.
Mountain Ridge, yeah, those were all closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About the same time, for sure. School district must have been amalgamating or doing something.
Same thing as we did a few years ago.
Yeah, that just changed it up a bit. So, and then from Lady Grey, high school was
In Lady Grey.
in Lady Grey as well.
And then the school, of course, burned down. The first year I was at university, actually, give or take a year. Yeah. All our records gone.
Oh, I'm sure you were a good student.
Oh, excellent.
Yes, of course.
And the old Lady Grey School had a big open basement. Well, the school was high, and then the basement, just planks, little rooms where we practiced our drama, whatever, ping pong tables, and the old furnace covered with asbestos,
Yes.
and the dust on the asbestos.
Oh boy.
When you think about it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you left Lady Grey, well, first of all, can you tell us about any of your teachers? Who were some of your teachers during your school years?
Well, the only one I can remember for sure is Mrs. Pickett at Nicholson. And then there was another one, I don't know where she came along, I think her name was Kovacs. And that's all I can remember. Now in Golden, of course, there was Mr. Gilmore, Mr. McLaren. Bellamore. That's all I can think of right now.
Wow,
Yeah.
you've done good.
There's one other one. Well, Ellis Chuck came along later. Yeah.
And so you completed
Oh, Clark, my favorite teacher.
Clark.
Clark, R.W. Clark. When I did my job study, and I said he's going to be my mentor. In my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I kept in touch with him for years. He wrote to me, I wrote to him, and then the last letter I got from him was from Cuba. He was appointed to the government foreign service, and he said, I don't know if I'll be able to write to you again. He said, Castro is in the mountains above Havana.
Oh,
And that's the last I heard of him.
well,
Well, I learned from him. And a few years later, when Sid Parker was our MP, I asked him to track him down, which he did. He was in India. And I never wrote to him. And then, like, he'd be a teacher in his late 20s when we were in high school, early 30s maybe.
so,
So
it was,
he'd be 10 years,
10 years
older
older.
than I am right now. So,
and
yeah.
did you already have in mind that you wanted to be a school teacher, or was he the reason that you decided to become a school teacher?
Well, that was one. I did a job study on teacher, lawyer,
Priest?
priest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I lived with a priest for 2 years at Notre Dame. They were our educators there. And I know I can't handle this one.
Yeah.
And lawyer, I wasn't really that keen on it.
Yeah.
But it's in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but teaching won out. So you went to university where? Notre Dame?
Well, 2 years at Notre Dame, 2 years at UBC, and then summer school to finish off degrees and improve, of course, step up.
And then right back to Golden.
Yes, I came here, and Bill Hart, he said, "You looking for a job?" I said, "Yes." Because, you know, he knew us. And was his wife a teacher?
I'm not sure. I've heard that he was, but
No, Bill wasn't. He
well,
was
then maybe she was, because
Yeah.
I have heard of a Hart that was
yes,
a teacher.
he was the secretary treasurer school board.
Okay.
Yeah, and he asked me if I wanted the job when I came from summer or school or my teaching whatever in the spring. I said sure. So he said, "Well, we'll have an opening in Parson." Okay. So my first year, I think I had 44 students, grade 5, 6, 7. I know I had 3 grades.
And 44 students.
44 students.
That's quite
44 or 46, I'm not too sure. I know it was.
That's quite a handful for a brand new teacher.
Yes. And Mr. Spate, do you remember Mr. Spate?
No.
He was the principal. Yeah, and he taught 7 and 8, 5, 6, 7, or 7, 8, 9 maybe. They had 9. The high school had been taken out. Yeah.
Right.
So at the end of that year, Mr. Hart got a hold of me. He said, the principalship is opened. Apply for it. I said, just 1 year, you know. He said, apply for it. So I did, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that you continue to substitute today, so you must often think about that, or maybe you don't. But I certainly would think about that when I'm going into a classroom today, because they're quite a bit smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
but there's still some mixed grades, isn't there?
yes,
in some
yeah,
of the
1 and
classes?
2 or 2 and 3, yeah.
Yeah.
And little kids, did you teach my grandmother? When they start saying great grandmother,
Then you're in trouble.
yeah. Yeah, and I said, who was your grandmother? And they tell me, and I said, actually I did, or no, whatever. They said, was she a good student? No comment. Yeah. Oh, those were good years.
Yeah.
Very active school.
Your school at Parson, you guys were involved in all kinds of things. You outside of extracurricular.
Mm-hmm. Lots of stuff.
Yeah. Can you name some of those things?
Well, let's see. We did a hike to Golden. What was the reason for that one? To raise money for something. My whole class walked to Golden.
Was that for the Purcell Apartments, maybe? Because they did.
I don't know.
Yeah. Because there was a couple of big walks that went from Parson to Golden. One to build the seniors' Purcell Apartments, and the other one for the museum, to build a museum.
I might have been a museum, because that kind of caught our attention more than anything. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Then we had our ice carnivals and trips around the countryside.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one to Expo?
Yes, which I have first-hand knowledge of.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. I think I was maybe the youngest one on the bus, but certainly, when I talk to people about it today, I think, you couldn't do that today the way
No.
that you did it back then. You just advertised that you had spaces on the bus, and you rounded up a group of kids to fill the bus.
Yep.
And no extra insurance involved, none of the things that would be required today. Parents would have to sign waivers
Gee.
and and what teachers want to take that on, right? That's a huge responsibility. And other people that I've talked to about my trip said, "Oh yeah, I went with Mr. Pecora on a trip to trail," or "I went." So you were quite active taking
Yes.
kids around for experiences
Every
like
year. The first thing the kids did in September, where are we going this year? And the early years, we had the private bus. Who owned it? Thomas.
that. Oh, was it Willard Thomas?
Willard Thomas,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
For a few years. And he'd come to me, he said, "Where can we go?" He says, "Yep, I'll drive."
Yeah.
No cost. Took us wherever we wanted.
So some of the places you went were,
Well, we
besides
went to the
Expo.
Spokane Expo. And one of the longest ones we took was to Drumheller, to Edmonton, to Jasper, and home. That's where I stepped in the gopher hole.
Oh,
And I live with that now. Yeah, and another one, we went to the island. Vancouver, crossed over to the island. Different places in Victoria. Yeah.
so you gave a lot of young people in the valley an opportunity to travel that they probably wouldn't have had otherwise.
I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think so. Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you for doing that. So how many years did you, okay, let me go back. During your time at Parsons School in your earlier years, you met and married your wife.
Yes.
Can you
It was
tell-
a setup.
Was it?
Oh, there was scratch. Yeah, she came there the second year. No, the first year I was principal. Yeah, because the second year, here's the difference. They took her out of the school the next year when we started to have a relationship, right?
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Yeah, she was there and we were engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah, and no, she couldn't stay there. So they sent her to Lady Grey.
Yeah, that's changed
Yes.
significantly, hasn't it? So what year was that? What year were you married, I should say?
This is our 52nd anniversary this year. Yeah, man. I can't remember. 60, 61, 63? Would that be 50?
63 sounds
63?
about right.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. And then from your marriage, you've got 3 children.
Mm-hmm. One returned to Golden, and the 2 girls are in Vancouver, or Maple Ridge and Port Moody.
And their names?
Talia is the oldest, Michael, of course, in Golden, and Tira is the youngest.
And you've finally, at a pretty good age,
70
become a
plus.
grandfather.
Yes.
And you were starting to wonder if that was ever going to happen.
Yes. Yeah, there's the one on next to me there. That's Tira's 2 kids. Where's Michael's kids? That's her down on the other frame. Yeah.
Yeah. So your years at Parson, then you started there about 1961.
Mm-hmm.
And how many years were you there before retirement?
Let's see, I thought I was there 17 years. And then an opening came up at Edelweiss. And the superintendent suggested that I look for fresh air. So I went to Edelweiss. Spent 4 years there.
Yeah.
3 years as principal, and then they took kids out, and they made me the head teacher under Lady Grey. I will not repeat the name. Whoops. so then I had to get away from that school. So I just said, wherever. I said, Nicholson would be nice. So they put me at Alexander Park. And that's where I spent the rest of my life, in teaching.
Do you still have an opportunity to do a bit of substitute teaching?
I've been in Alexander Park several times this year already. It's kind of funny because there's a grade K to 3.
Yeah.
I haven't been to Lady Grey for 2 years.
And how long do you see yourself continuing to have an impact on the kids in the valley that way?
Well, I keep saying to myself, I'll shut her down when I'm 80,
Ah,
give or take.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you got a few years in you yet. So you were raised here. We're how many miles out of Golden? How many kilometers, I should say, out of Golden, I guess.
Well, this is the family farm here,
Right.
which is about 10K
From Golden.
from Golden.
And so how often, when you were a child, how often would your folks actually make the trip into Golden?
I think on the weekend.
Yeah.
I think I know they'd go in at the shop or take a sack of potatoes in and trade it off for a bag of flour or sugar at Tommy King's old store. Yeah. And that's basically how it was done.
Trading.
Trading, yeah. And mainly for sugar and flour.
Yeah.
Because everything else Dad and Mom grew, the bacon and the hams and the chickens, the eggs, the beef,
Yeah, and gardens.
and garden.
Your mom had great gardens.
She sure did. She just touched a seed and it sprouted and produced fruit. She was a great gardener.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
I remember my grandmother talking about what a great gardener she was, and my own grandmother was a really good gardener as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah, although the old timers, see, they just, would today's kids be able to handle it on their own if they couldn't go to Overweighty?
no, I don't think so.
Well, my grandkids here, they plant spuds and seeds and things every year with me.
Good, good.
And then in the fall, they just go wild when they start digging potatoes.
I think it's so great for them to know where the food comes from and take part in the whole process from planting to harvesting. I think that's really great. I remember you telling us about, in a previous conversation, about your dad because he was Italian, that he had to make trips to town to report.
To the police, yes.
Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, his guns were confiscated because they were afraid he might become a terrorist in today's language. Arm all the Italians in the valley or something, I don't know. But after a while, the policeman didn't worry about it. It was a provincial police, and he used to come out and have coffee with Mom and Dad. Just to check in instead of Dad having to go in all the time.
Right.
The details are a little vague because I was just 5 or 6 years old.
But he had to report on a regular basis, didn't he? Like
Yeah.
into town. And I've not talked to any other cultures that were required to do that. So
Well, I
I'm
don't
curious
know.
about
Like,
it.
I think we talked about it. The Palombos and the Alfanos, if they had to do that.
Yeah, and I don't know if they did or not. But it's interesting to think that, in the
Well,
last
see, they
100
came-
years that was required.
They came prior to Dad, so maybe they were citizens
Yeah.
and were already cleared. But Dad was just a young Canadian, not Canadian yet, because they had to wait 10 years back then. I think so. So he wouldn't have become a citizen until basically the war started.
Right. And one of the things that I've talked to my kids about, and others too, I'm sure, because I love to share some of these things from the past about when I went to school, that I started in Lady Grey in 1961. So, not so very long after the end of the Second World War. And we still had blackout drills where we had to pull down the shades and climb under our desks and cover our heads. And
See, I graduated in '54.
So that would have been closer to you.
Yes.
And do you remember those events?
Now that you mention it, I think we did something like that. I just not sure.
It had a huge impact on me that I've remembered my whole life, that it was a very solemn thing we had to, Mrs. Montgomery was my grade 1 teacher, and she impressed upon us that these are the things that had to happen. And the alarm would go at the school, and each one of us had a task. Somebody had to go pull down the blinds, and somebody had to make sure that the door was unlocked, or that the door was locked, I guess. No, the other way around, that the doors to the classroom were locked. And
Sounds familiar.
yeah, doesn't it? And then we had to prepare so that we were, under our desks and covered our heads with our hands. And
I don't remember that part.
Yeah.
I do remember something about the windows.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we had, it was a siren that went off at the school that
No, I just don't
called
remember
us
that
to the
at all.
windows. So
Yeah, that's something I don't recall.
I was hoping you would.
Probably when you leave her today,
Yeah.
I don't recall that at all.
I haven't actually brought that up with anybody else while we've been in conversation. I just knew that you were at the school a lot longer than a lot of the people that we will talk to, so I thought maybe you might remember it. So while you attended school in Golden, was that when you became aware and involved in community, like community groups and organizations, or did that come later in your life?
That came later. I think I got involved with little odds and ends through the school.
Right.
But when I got my full-time job, and then I started getting involved first through the church, and then politics, and then other things, sponsoring little activities. Yeah.
How many years have you been a member of Sacred Heart?
Life.
Life member. And I saw a picture of you yesterday. I was scanning some pictures, and I saw a picture of you flipping pancakes for the Lions Club. And how long have you been involved with that
Oh my!
organization?
I think I joined the Lions sometime in the 70s. Yes.
Worked on all kinds of community projects. Is there
Lots
one
of-
that sticks out of the ones that you've worked on for the Lions Club?
My goodness. Well, we started off, one of the big fundraisers was, we started off with, the $1,000 bingos. That was something new. And then the Durand Manor, we did of course we sponsored the building, and then we put in the tile outside, the walkways. And before my time, there was at the seniors' home. What's that called?
Purcell?
Purcell Apartments, yes, that was before my time, yeah.
And I think the Lions were involved in the swimming pool, but that would
Oh,
be
yes,
before your
yes,
time
that's
too,
before
right?
my time, yeah, yeah.
And anything other than that? I know that you still continue to work with the Lions Club, so
In fact, I'm just trying to organize something different right now. A keg of beer down the Kicking Horse,
oh,
not with the beer. And you buy a ticket and guess the time.
Yeah.
that's interesting.
I just got the barrel yesterday.
I was relating to somebody because I saw it in the newspaper, which helped me remember that years ago, back in the late 60s, we had an event in Golden where you guessed when the ice
Yes.
flow went out. And they had a barrel on the ice that was attached to a stop clock. And when and you signed your name up for the time for that
Right.
as well. And when the ice went under the barrel and the barrel pulled down whatever the time was on the clock, that was who won the money.
Yeah, we thought about that, but it seems different. The ice conditions seem to be different now.
They are. Yeah, I agree.
I think before they would just settle down and then break, but now they build up and come down. Yeah.
That'd be a much different one to have to do now, for sure.
And I think they had this keg run years and years ago. I think in the back of my mind, I kind of think about it, that it was done. Now this year we got it organized a bit too late to get everything put together and get Kokanee to donate the barrel. And so what I'm going to recommend tomorrow night that we just do a small one, maybe just 500 tickets and throw it in by the Kicking Horse rest stop.
Yeah.
And just try it out this year, because the water by May, the long weekend in May, might be turbulent.
Right.
Yeah.
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 And if it is, well, We'll get some kayakers to follow the barrel.
Right. Oh, good idea.
So we'll see what happens. If it works well, next year we'll be prepared. We can have it earlier.
Yes, when the water's
Like the
still
water
low.
is now, it's just
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And other groups that you've worked with?
Well, Knights of Columbus, that's with the church, and our biggest, we do pancake breakfasts, and we got involved with the rodeo. The Lions did too. Remember the rodeo days? Yeah, we had a beer garden, and the Lions would have, or the Knights of Columbus would go to IGA and have a pancake breakfast, yeah, and then barbecue in the afternoon. Yeah. So that was one of our big fundraisers, and we'd sell tickets, and we'd get back about 70% of what we sold. So we'd give $100 to the Dolphins, $100 here, and different groups. Not much, but a little bit to everybody. Yeah, and then a few years ago, we've just had to dissolve.
Right.
We joined Infomere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it just we didn't replenish ourselves.
Right. Yep. Which is happening with other organizations in town too, that they're fading away.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the natural evolution of it. But,
I guess what is it? The Kinsmen, they were the ones that were hit the hardest here. Yeah.
yeah, and they did so many good works for the community
Yes,
as well.
yes.
That it's always a shame to see them fade away, because they certainly created some great community memories. Maybe something else will take their place.
Yes.
And we can hope so. So, one of the things that we asked you to think about during our earlier conversation was about some of the old timers in the area. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about your uncle who lived not far from you here. Tell us
Well,
about him.
I really don't know much about him. When you think about it now, you say, why didn't we talk to Mom? Because she mentioned him but didn't really discuss anything. Like, he died in 1935.
What was his name?
Antonio Pellegrino. Yeah. And did I show you his picture? Yes.
Yes, you
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was, I don't even know if he started on a railway or just went straight into farming. And he had that sheep farm in Donald. And then he ended up out here, and he passed away at this farm here at Horse Creek. Yeah. So what he did for those between 1885 and 1935, all the details, it's too bad.
Yeah.
And we've been trying to locate his grave site. No record of the town. The church has a record of a funeral, but not for some reason or another. What was missing? Most of the priests would fill in the name, the date, and then do something else, which he didn't do.
Interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
We've just worked on a project at the museum where we've identified more than 400 people buried in the Golden Cemetery who don't have headstones or grave markers.
Wow.
So I'm sure, is probably among that number.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we stomped around up there, and a few years ago there used to be tin markers, but they seem to be gone now
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, they are.
Fallen into the leaves or picked up or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kathy Williams, yeah, she was helping us out. Because she was planning things out, and then she left, and so we went up there. The only thing we could remember was the fact that he was on the hill. Well, that's the old original thing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That's
what-
too bad.
Yeah, it's too bad because it would be nice to have them marked. And part of the project we've applied for funding for, and we hope that we are successful in our application, is to create a large sign that lists the names of those 400 plus people.
Wow.
So that it can be erected at the cemetery, just to say that, we don't know the locations of these people, but
Yeah.
these are people that we would like to have
There
remembered.
are a lot of places that have the little concrete thing and nothing there. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, my niece was, when she was stumbling around there, she found this one buried in leaves, and she cleaned it up, and then at the head was a lilac bush. And she said, I wonder if this is it, because Mom liked lilacs. And she may have planted this lilac.
Yeah. It's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Dig around in there and get some DNA samples.
You might find a few, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And so what about other old timers in your neighborhood? that you
Well, the
might
ones that
recall?
just associated with Mom and Dad a lot was, well, Joe Durand, you know, with the nickname everybody lovingly called him.
Yeah.
Peg
Peg
Leg
Leg.
Joe, yes. And he would disappear for weeks on end, and I don't know if he went hunting or trapping or whatever, and all of a sudden he'd show up. And the first thing he'd do, he'd come down for coffee, and Mom and Dad would offer him a meal. And he lived up on the hill here, on the hill property. I don't know what the first name of the hills. And he'd come quite regularly for coffee. And then down the road here was Otto Larson, an old timer, and he visited with us quite often. Yeah, he loved Mom's spaghetti. So when he came, she had to put an extra handful in. And then he'd come the next day, and he said, "I don't know how your wife makes the spaghetti red." He said, "I've cooked it and cooked it and cooked it, and it still doesn't turn red." Now, why I remember that, Mom used to talk about it, you know. Yeah, yeah. And he'd come and help Dad out, you know, in their farming time. And then, oh yes, don't forget our Swedish brothers, the Elmberg brothers,
Oh.
Knut and Hugo. Yes, they went back to Sweden. Yeah, and they were regular visitors and would come and help Dad harvesting, you know, and that kind of thing, picking rocks, harvesting the wheat, whatever. Yeah, those are the ones that I remember very specifically of the real old timers.
Right.
And then, of course, Mom and Dad were very close, well, to the Russos up on the hill above Palombos and the Palombos. We'd visit back and forth quite regularly. One weekend we'd be there, another week later they'd be down here. And the early days you were asking about transportation, wintertime, a horse and sleigh. I love that. I can still remember it. I'm sorry that we never took care of that sleigh.
Yeah.
We kept it in a shed. The shed deteriorated, and so did the sleigh. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you didn't worry because of very little traffic.
Yeah. I remember a story that was told to me by Joyce Fisher that her brother, when it was announced that Queen Elizabeth was coming to Golden, I think that might have been 1959.
In the 50s sometime. She
Yeah.
became queen in what, 52?
Yeah,
53? 52?
yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, her brother rode a horse from Spillimachine to Golden in order to see the Queen. And he never met one single car on his way to
Yeah.
Golden from Spillimachine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, it's the same thing when we walked to school. So you couldn't do that today.
no.
Even if you had, well, you couldn't walk to Nicholson, but the traffic, not just the cars, it's the logging trucks and the transport trucks.
And the speed at which they travel now
Right.
is quite significantly different as well. And then, how many of your neighbors have you watched come and go? I mean, we talked about the older generation of them, but then a new generation moved into your neighborhood.
Well, you know, the close ones are basically still here. You know, we go down to the Reeters. Okay, there's one member of the Reeter family still living there.
Right.
Yeah, well, a couple and the kids. Louis Alfano, in the Alfano farm.
Yeah.
Peggy Baudry, who was on Milam.
Right.
And this was her grandparents, would it be her grandparents that owned this
Yes. Yeah.
place next door? So they're still here, us. And Otto Larson's farm here, that's changed. Yeah. And then going this way, they're pretty well all gone, but this little section here. And then you go towards McMurdo, the Palombos are still that
Yeah.
property there. How in the world they ever farmed it?
Isn't that the truth? Yeah, I always, because our property bordered Columbus, they actually touched.
Well, at the bottom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember that my dad said that the farm, which he bought from Tom Hawks, was perfect for the kind of farmer he wanted to be. The slopes were all steep, but at the bottom of the hill the fishing was really good. And Palumbo's was very similar. Dad said one time he remembers going up there when he first started to work for Harry Wellstead, and Mr. Palumbo had 3 or 4 of the kids on a tractor on the side hill going along, and Dad said to him, "Gee, Sal, do you think that's a good idea?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, no worries. Can always make another kid. Can't make another me."
Yeah. Good old time philosophy.
Old time philosophy.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. All the hillsides there going along there with the rakes and the wagons, and
And still they made a living
sure they did.
on that rough
Yeah.
old farm out there.
No, this place here, there wasn't that much cleared like the Colombo farm, but wheat in the early days, lots of potatoes, which for us, and he also, Dad used to have a 45-gallon drum out there with a fire under it, and you boiled the potatoes. You reach in there with a shovel, put it into a bucket, go give it to the pigs. Another one, you'd mix it with the bran, give it to the chickens.
Yeah. So you used everything.
Because now we get several pails of potatoes that last us most of the winter. In those days, that cellar just had tons that looked like tons of potatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no fertilizer, the crazy things would still grow.
Yeah.
Well, the manure, they spread the manure. Yeah.
That's again becoming the norm. People are looking towards the old-fashioned manure instead of the prepackaged stuff you buy at the store, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of our ways are coming
Yes.
back around. I think that our neighbors are going back to the idea of helping each other out, which was lacking for a lot of years. And people are growing gardens again and trying to be more healthful in what they're eating. And you do that best when you know what's in the soil and what you're putting in your face. Yeah. So, can you tell me about any events in Golden that you really enjoyed going to? Maybe rodeos or May Days or
May Day is the one I remember because I used to dance the maypole. Yeah, and do you recall there used to be a big barn with a high school
Yes.
race, and that's where we had the fall fair and the May Day. Yeah, it was a big barn there, and that's where you put your show stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the old agricultural hall.
Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
And it was there till I was going to say almost recently, but it isn't recent. But it hasn't been gone that long.
No. I think it was built in 1912.
Wow.
And I do know that it was really a community effort. And Tom Hawks had a lot to do with the building of that agricultural building.
Yeah, that's probably the only reason why I remember. Yeah.
Do you remember who taught you that?
No.
May?
No,
That was a long time ago.
that would be 60 odd years ago, maybe more.
Did your mother and father enter produce and so forth in the fairs that went on in the same venue?
I really can't say definitely yes, but I think so. They participated in something. Yeah. Probably potatoes or something like that. And in those days, they grew turnips and cabbages. Like today, you buy the little perfect turnip. I mean, he used crazy cabbages, throw it out into the field, and chop it up into chunks for the cows. They were huge. Or maybe I was small, I don't know. And turnips and mangels.
Yeah, I remember definitely seeing some huge produce coming out of this valley. But nobody's growing things like that anymore. So
Now you can't even go to a seed cad, like I say, perfect for, and you see a person holding these little cabbages,
Yeah, I think that's kind of scary because, what did they have to do to it over the years in order to make it perfect?
Take out a gene.
Yeah, that's right. Take out a gene. I don't mind if it's not perfect.
Yeah.
The tomatoes with the cracks in them taste just as good as the ones
Yeah.
that don't have the cracks in
But
them.
that was the thing when you mentioned tomatoes, like Mum would start her tomatoes in the house. But you know, you had a shorter season back then.
Yes.
You really did.
Yeah, you definitely did. And this year it could be really extended by the looks of the weather that we're having. It's been quite a different season so far, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that we did 60 days. That used to be our growing season. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot.
Yeah, my Mum, I remember there was a little bit of a hillside next to the house, and she'd plant her cucumbers there, and it'd take over the whole hill, you know. And nobody dared go inside there. She had to go in and pick the cucumbers. Because there was an old wives' tale that if you touched them and played with them and disturbed them before you picked them, they would get sour.
Oh, I hadn't heard that one before.
Eh? She was really adamant about that. So if you wanted a cucumber, she'd go step in there, find one, and pick it for you. Yeah.
Did your parents have any other superstitions that you'd like to share?
That's the only one I can think of offhand. Yeah.
I know that in the Palumbo family, they still to this day have a little bag with salt in it that they tie up, and it goes in the glove box of all their vehicles. And it's meant to ward off evil, which is kind of interesting.
And,
that they
and
carry
this
it forward.
generation still does it?
Some of them do, yes.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, some of them are.
It's strange, but it's great.
Yeah.
No, you know, it ties them to the past.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's too many younger people now just, the heck what happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. Yeah. You know, I can't offhand.
Yeah,
I'm trying to go through the sort of the, no, not,
Yeah. And I remember them talking about Mrs. Palumbo when babies were born. She used to put a button on or a penny or something on their belly buttons and bind it so that their belly buttons didn't stick out.
yeah. Oh, I just thought of another one. Down below our place here, there used to be a forest of spruce and birch. And every fall, there were two kinds of mushrooms that grew there. Latare, which means milk, right? They were the white ones. And then there was the Wunchirus, red ones, right? And we'd go down there amongst the trees and pick them. And then Mum would put them in the big crocks, right? Put a weight on top. And did she add vinegar? But she had to stir them with a red hot poker, which drew out the poison.
Oh my goodness.
And then what did she do with them? Like, did you consume
Oh no, we
them?
ate them.
You
know.
ate them.
Yeah, take the lid off, get a scoop, and fry them with your omelet or whatever, right? Beautiful. And now they've all disappeared because the forest was cut.
Yeah.
The spruce trees were all cut.
Right. Yeah. And what about medicine? Did she use other like herbs or plants for medicine?
I don't think so. Not as medicine. No, just food.
Just food.
And every spring, dandelions.
It's supposed to be a really good liver cleanser. Those
Yes,
dandelions, right?
Oh, the first thing we'd go around and lift boards. And under the boards there was a dandelion. They were yellow and white.
Yes.
Oh, those were delicious. Right? And then as the season got on, you went and picked them a little more mature. And she'd have a great big crock and sit there for hours cleaning the fuzz off the bottom, cutting the tough part off there. Olive oil and vinegar and buttered bread.
What did she call it in Italian? What were those little fresh dandelions called? I just asked because I remember that Gino's family called them something. I just don't remember what it was. It's those first
Nope.
bites in the spring.
Yeah. The mushrooms, of course, are fungi. Fungus.
Fungus.
Yeah. Fungi.
Yeah, fungi.
Yeah. No, I don't recall a special name for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I forget. They called them little somethings. It was something they called them. But, yeah. So, Lots of food stuff that your mother must have put up. What different methods that she used would.
Basically in your glass sealers. Yeah.
And a root cellar, which was
Oh, big
key,
root
right?
cellar. Yeah. Your potatoes, your carrots, and there's another thing. The carrots seem to survive. Now you can't make them survive.
No, you can't. I don't know what it is, but I haven't been able to grow a carrot for years.
You know, but we grow them, but by gosh, if you don't eat them, and we have a nice root cellar, nice temperature. They say now they're supposed to bury them in sawdust or sand, and we tried it, but they still shrivel up.
Yeah. I learned about carrots when I was about 13, and my grandmother sent me out to the root cellar to bring in some carrots. And I went through the door and was being a bit lazy and didn't go back to the bin, but there was some carrots growing in or planted in a bucket of sand right by the door, so I pulled them out. And that was my lesson. I got a whooping for that, I think, because those were the carrots they were holding over, because the carrot seed only arrives every 2 years rather than every year.
Oh yeah, they are biennials.
Biennial,
Yeah, right.
and I had pulled out
yeah.
the seed carrots.
Uh-oh.
Not very
not,
good.
Not a good thing at all. Because Grandma, of course, kept her own seeds. Tomatoes, everything. She always had newspapers spread all over the house in the fall with something drying on it for next year.
No, we had a big garden, and Mom and Dad encouraged us as kids, and I always loved to grow things, and I tried different things, even peanuts. The plants grew, but no peanuts. Yeah, and the pumpkins, I always played around with big pumpkins. Yeah. Big, I think the biggest, I got a picture somewhere around here of Talia holding this great big, not holding, sitting on it. She was only a couple of years old or whatever, and Grandpa behind her, right? And this pumpkin must have been quite large. Yeah.
You really only grow big pumpkins just for show, because
Yes.
To be able to cook them or use them is quite a daunting task.
So I've been trying to grow the Atlantic giants for the last 4 or 5 years. The last 4 or 5 years, I can't get them to even flower. Like last year, we had hardly any pumpkins, no insects.
Right.
Right. Yes,
And
of
I'm not going
course.
to go around and you're female or male. Okay. And that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to muck around with them for sure.
Yeah.
I know last year even my zucchinis, I only got 1 or 2 small zucchinis because
Yeah, that stuff grows like weeds.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I had lots of foliage, but just no fruit.
Same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we're definitely missing our insects. They're in decline, and it shows.
And we put up a mason nest, what do you call it, for the mason bees. And we had some go into it last year, so we'll see what happens this year. It's the one with little tubes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, hopefully that works.
We'll see if 6 come out. 6 went in last year and 10 come out this year. I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I think basically we've gone through our questions that we set about to ask you today, and we really appreciate your time.
No, this is great. It
Yeah.
sort of wakens a person's memory up, you know.
for sure.
When you head down the road, I'm going, hey, gee, I should have mentioned that.
Well, if you do remember something that you'd really like included, you just give us a call, and we'll be happy to come back out and add it to it for sure. And yeah.
Yeah, it's easy because many people are thinking that they'll remember things as we
Sure.
drive away.
That's right.
Yeah, but one other little thing about the farm was for the many years it was just the horse. And then Dad sometime, I can't recall when he got a tractor. And he sold the horses, our pet horses. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because we didn't have the motorized
No.
tractors and things that we have now. To be able to do that.
They were very excitable horses. If something went wrong, it didn't matter where they were, they headed home, with you or without you.
Oh,
You'd be in the field, you know, pitching hay onto and a couple of us were on top, scooping it in, and then all of a sudden something would happen, and they'd take off, and Dad would holler, you know, and so we just would dive into the hay and hold on for dear life. They'd go through 2 gates, head for the barn, and pull by the barn and stop. You couldn't have steered them there, you know. And there they were. Just go next to the barn, nice, and that's where we were supposed to go. Scary, geez.
I imagine because you lived so close to the school, you didn't need to ride a horse to school, which some of the valley kids definitely rode horses to
Yeah,
school.
we walked here, what was it? Okay, would be 3 or 4 kilometers.
Yeah.
Then we got bikes, we got modernized.
That didn't help you in the wintertime, though.
No, we just walked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the summer we used our bikes to go into town and the fellows, I think he was a United Church minister. What was his name? He sponsored a softball team. So we go in the Saturday afternoon, play softball.
Yeah, is that the only activity like that you went into town for?
Basically, that
Yeah.
was it. Yeah.
Baseball.
And then the big treat, go to the old building that became Dahlberg's Building Center next to the school board. There was an old building in there,
Oh, yes.
and that's where the movie theater.
Right.
Yeah, special treat, 10 cents. You go to the movie today. Yeah.
And what kind of treats did you get while you were there, or did you just have money to get into the
Just to
museum?
go in, I don't know if they had popcorn or chocolate bars or anything. Yeah, 'cause it would be pretty difficult to do the popcorn back then. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But you're the first one who's recalled the old theater in the old Albert building. So.
And then, of course, Dahlberg, I think, took it over as his building center, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ivor.
Yep. Albert Dahlberg.
And I wonder what happened to the building. You know, these things disappear and you don't know what happened. Somebody bought the property and demolished it, I guess.
Was that the building that was moved into the location where, at the light? Who's in there now? Not Turning Point. The other one.
Omega?
No.
On the
right
other
at the
side.
light.
Oh, right.
What is that? How come my brain's just
Apostoli's?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, they couldn't move that one, Colleen.
Okay. I know it was a mill building that they brought down the street that the Apostoli's building's in. I just didn't know if it was Ivor's building or not. But that's definitely a mill building. Because there was quite a story in the newspaper about them using teams of horses and logs, and they rolled it down the street. Apparently it was quite a sight, and they brought it into that location there.
Because that one there, I remembered, it was basically, what do you call it, shiplap walls and things. I don't know, you could move it.
Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of those old buildings from the old mill got, moved around in town and used for various things. But, yeah, Golden, some of the houses that are in Golden came from Donald when Donald met its demise, and some of them came, right from the mill site buildings in town. So, yeah, they didn't waste anything, these ancestors.
Yeah. Well, look at the Civic Center.
Yes.
How much of old stuff ended up in the Civic Center.
Yeah, the roof trusses and the
Those
shiplap
beams
on the
underneath,
walls.
my goodness.
Yeah.
They're solid as they were then, but
Yeah.
probably more.
Yeah, probably more.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well seasoned.
Yeah. Yeah. We think we know how to recycle, but we really don't have any idea
No.
compared to those old
Well,
timers.
it's easier for us to go, oh, let's go to Home Hardware and buy another board.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
The only thing that's sad about Golden, the downtown area, a lot of that stuff got destroyed. Like the old Queen's Hotel in Rolston? Yeah.
Yeah.
Down that strip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Kootenai House and then the Queens, they were right next door to each other. And both of them were lost. And the Columbia Hotel, which was right on the same street beside Rolston's, it was lost. And,
Yeah, the only building on there is DJ's, isn't it? Pretty well.
yeah.
DJ's.
In the Moon Cafe.
Yeah. The moon's about 100 years old, though.
You have a fascinating job.
I do.
It's fascinating. You hire anybody?
We certainly invite volunteers to come along.
I thought she was going to say that.
To come along and help us with projects that are. Yeah, no, I definitely do have an interesting job, and it's been a pleasure and a privilege for me to be able to care for all this family history and all the bits about Golden. I take it quite
And you're into
seriously.
it.
And I'm into it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah.
you could be just somebody there. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit of glue and I put this picture of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But no, I really do care about all the families that I have the opportunity to work with and all the, the things about Golden. I think it's a fascinating community. We've had lots of interesting things go on here that
Yeah.
I'm always trying to relate to people. So sometimes they see me coming, I'm sure, and go, oh no, here she comes again. She's going to
Yeah.
tell another story.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to be home tonight, Colleen. Sorry. Yeah. Wow.
Do you play any musical instruments?
Radio and a phonograph.
Yeah, me too.
My dad bought me a violin.
Oh,
Yeah. And well, here's another old timer we missed, Frank Pagliaro.
oh yes.
He was out, I mentioned Russo's. They went to the Okanagan, right? And who owns Russo's farm now? Spain?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And then down the road was Pagliaro. And they visited quite often, yeah. Old Frank. And he was trying to teach me the violin. But he was a fiddler.
Oh, and that's different, isn't it?
It
Quite a
is,
bit
yeah.
different.
It just, I just couldn't get the hang of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you want a violin, I have one here. Well, I was what? That violin will be at least 60 years old.
Wow.
An Eaton Special.
Maybe one of your grandchildren will take up.
Well, Sierra loves music.
Oh, good.
She's into piano right now. And she likes to play with a mouth organ. So,
Maybe.
yeah.
Maybe you'll be able to pass it on
Yeah.
to another generation that'll.
Well, if Michael would get his trumpet out, yeah, he was a good trumpet player. Has to join the band now that he has more free time. Aha! Well, he does.
Yeah.
He keeps saying it. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a busy fellow.
Yeah.